Hello, guys, gals, and non binary pals. Welcome to the Storytellers Guild. My name is Max, and today I would like to welcome you to the inaugural episode of Let's Write, an ongoing series where we write stories, whether they be short fiction or long fiction, or maybe one day books. The purpose of this series is to hopefully get rid of some of the fear and anxiety around the blank page, getting started on a project, or the mystery around writing. There's a lot of people who write, and there are lots of books about writing, but actually writing, showing someone writing, is not something that I see a lot of. And so I wanted to share my process with you, not only to give you some insights into what I like to do, but also to help you formulate what is most fun for you. So for our first project, I'm going to start with something pretty simple, but also challenging. It's going to be a short story. I'm not very good at short stories. I tend towards longer fiction. And it's going to be a detective story. I decided this because of several different elements that came together around the same time in my brain that made me think, that would be fun. And those elements are a detective who gets everything wrong and still somehow manages to solve the case, a fun, colorful world like the animated movies Steam Boy or Little Nemo's Adventures in Slumberland or any of Hayao Miyazaki's films, and this initial scene and this initial sentence that really stuck with me. So, as always, the most important thing when writing is we are here. We are sitting down to write. And as a writer, as an aspiring writer, as someone who enjoys writing, that's the best thing you can do for yourself, is give yourself the chance to sit down and write. Everything else comes naturally, or with a little bit of practice. So grab yourself a little bit of liquid inspiration, whether that's coffee, tea, water, or something else, and let's get started, shall we? The character's name is one of the things that came to me first. I had tried very hard not to think too much about this story, but there were a small handful of tidbits that I wanted to have in place to kind of lay a foundation. The first was the name of the main character. I wanted, when I thought of the images of this fantastical sort of alternate reality city, I wanted it to feel fun and colorful and whimsical. And so I thought of like watercolor paintings or Rococo paintings, right? They're very effervescent. You almost feel like you're flying when you look at them. They lift you up. And so I wanted something like that. And I decided the best way to incorporate that concept was to give the character a name that resonated and constantly reinforced that. So this character's name is Duncan Watercolour. This is our detective. And so he's Detective Duncan Watercolour. And just to be fancy, I'm going to make it the British spelling. Obviously, I'm not British, but it's fun to do anyway. And this is going to be the case of, and I know that this is a thievery case. Someone has been burgled. One of the nobles has had something very valuable stolen. But it's something that wouldn't seem important at first glance. So I'm going to call it the case of the missing, and let's call it the case of the missing what? The case of the missing locket. Something simple. We don't know what the locket is yet. I'm not even sure it's going to be a locket. But this will just give us something to start with, right? And that's really, when you sit down, that's really what you want to do, is you want to have this concept of, the intimidation factor, the blank page, gone. And the easiest way to do that is to chase it away and show it that you can take up space on the page. And I love to begin stories, so this is never a hard part for me. But finishing them is, and I'm optimistic that this series will give me so many opportunities to do that too. So let's get started with our story, and let's move over to the writing room. I'm going to move over here, and now you can see I'm here in front of my blank page, right? Up here is Detective Duncan Watercolour, the case of the missing locket. And down here we have our blank page. So one of the things when I was brainstorming how I wanted to kick off this series was I had this image of a scene in my head that popped in like a movie or a picture in my imagination. And then I had this sentence that also popped into my head, and both of them seemed to fit pretty well. And when I thought about those things and the fun name Detective Duncan Watercolour, I was like, well, I have to write this. And I thought it would be fun to share that with you. So, this first sentence that really stuck with me was this: night settled over the city like a great big fluffy purple cat. Now, that's not very sensible right off the bat. You can see it's a little bit silly, a little bit childish, a little bit whimsical. And it's also very clear, like when you think of a great big cat settling down, if you've ever seen those chunky cats, when they settle, man, they settle and they really just kind of come down over everything. And I want it to be purple because the night sky in this world is purple. So it's a little bit different. It's vibrant. It's not a black night. It's not a dark blue night. It's purple. It's fun. It's colorful. And this simile, was something that I thought would be a really fun hook to get people in. And either you read that sentence, you're like, what in the world does this person mean? Let's keep reading. Or you think to yourself, nah, this is a bit too silly. I'm probably going to find something else. And that's fine. You can't please everybody, right? But what's important is that you make yourself happy when you write and that you're writing things that you're proud of. And so when I thought of that sentence, I was like, oh, that's a fun sentence. I want to share that with people. So that was one of my inspirational concepts for this story. And the other one was this initial scene, which I want to be someone sneaking across the rooftops in the rich part of town because someone's about to get something stolen, right? And so for me, it almost plays in my head like a movie, like a TV show or something, like the exciting beginning of a show where, someone gets something stolen and then in the next scene, the detective comes to try and figure out what happened. So that's kind of the outline I'm going to go for, and we'll see where we go from there. But today, because we don't have too much time, I want to get this first little bit started, get us off the ground. So the image I had was of a person going along this like ornate rooftop, right? It's the fancy part of town. And so the shingles on people's rooftops aren't there for purely practical purposes. They're also very ornate. They're very lavish. And this shows not only to the rest of the people in the city, but to the other nobles how much money these people have, right? It's a way for them to sort of flaunt their wealth. And so the shingles on this roof are going to be like filigreed silver. And so it also makes it very difficult to walk across. And so a burglar who's trying to sneak across the rooftops has the doubly difficult job of trying to navigate across these ornate shingles that are not designed to actually, prevent water from coming in, although they do that. They're designed to look ridiculous and silly, and impressive. So this person is walking across the rooftops, and in the background, there's some black and orange smoke coming up from the factories down by the port, and the stars are twinkling, and there's these feet are padding across the rooftop, and so that's kind of the image I was going for, and the whole process that really locked me into this story. So let's get started with that. And I'm just going to show you how I go about that. So I want to show that image, but I don't want to focus on the character too much yet. I want people to know that something is happening and that it's scary, a little bit unsettling, not too scary, but like unsettling for both the thief and the people whom the thief is attempting to steal from. Because, if you're a thief and you're trying to steal something, you obviously don't want to get caught. And so there's stakes on both sides. So I will intentionally keep it away from the character initially because I want this to be more about setting the scene. In the distance, I'm going to point out those smokestacks I talked about. Great smokestacks of the factories belched their endless plumes, endless chimneys, endless streams. I like plumes, I think. Endless plumes of black and orange smoke. I'm not going to say endless, I'm going to say nocturnal. Because at nighttime in this world, I imagine the factories run at night so the nobles don't have to look at the ugly smoke filling the sky, right? And maybe that will come back later in the story. We'll see. All was quiet, high above in the nobles' quarter. And then we're going to shake things up. So here's night is settled. Off in the distance, you see this. You're sort of like painting in layers, right? Like, so there's all these different elements of this image you want to try to communicate. So we've got the light, and we've got the nighttime, and we've got the quiet of the nobles' quarter. And now we're gonna disrupt some of that and make it a little bit exciting by saying, pair of dancing slippers, well worn and sure-footed, slipped across the silver filigreed shingles of a very important house. Not quite a castle, but not quite a house either. A very important mansion. And, you know, I'm gonna add, when I talk about dancing shoes, I want to add that all these like little details that are going to matter eventually in the story, and they might be an important part of the plot and the part of the mystery, and they might not. But I want to sprinkle them in just to give people some false leads and keep people guessing, right? So this will be one of them, and I'll keep a separate document that I'll start to show you next time, where I'll keep a bulleted list of all these little details that I show, and that way when they start to become important again in the story, I can go back and pick and choose the ones that I want, that I think make the most sense and make the story the most exciting, right? So a pair of slippers slipped across, a pair of slippers slipped. And see, now that you read it out loud, you do this a lot, I do this a lot, and I strongly encourage you to as well when you write, is to read it out loud, because hearing it, like, I didn't realize that, you know, the slippers were slipping until I said it out loud just then. And that's a great little catch. So, a pair of dancing shoes, we'll call it shoes, well worn and sure-footed, slipped across the silver filigreed shingles of a very important mansion. And then I'm gonna disrupt it by talking to the audience a little bit, because I think it's a lot of fun. When I like to write, I choose to write for people. Some people write for themselves, and that's wonderful. Some people write for other people, that's wonderful. Some people write for nobody, and that's wonderful too. Whatever way you like to write is wonderful. But I like to write for other people, and I like to sprinkle these little, you know, moments in there where I kind of talk to them directly, almost like I'm talking to you. So I'll say something like, a pair of shoes was sneaky in the night, and then I'm going to go, this wasn't supposed to happen, right? So, was not supposed to happen. And then I'm going to say why this doesn't happen. Punishments for breaking the law in this quarter were often the heaviest and the worst. Nobody would ever think to rob a house. To rob the nobles. But someone had. And they were well into their mission. And more importantly, someone had, and more importantly, And this is just, me reading it back out loud to myself and thinking about like what would be fun to hear next. I said, but someone had. And then I thought to myself, and more importantly, someone was. And I like that, and I think that's a fun way to end it today. More importantly, someone was. More importantly, someone was. So I choose the semicolon there instead of the comma because it's like, and more importantly, someone was. Like, we're looking at it, right? And so this sets the scene. Hopefully this draws people in a little bit. But the wonderful thing about writing is that you can always go back and edit, which we will do at some point after we finish our little short story. But I hope this gives you a little bit of insight into how the process goes, what makes for a fun story, how I enjoy writing, and how I sit down to write. And we'll leave it there for today. And as we leave, I want to remind you that in the world, just like on the written page, the story isn't over. It needs your words to continue. So take that with you, and I will see you in the next episode.